Cycle of the Gods, From Birth to Ragnarok. Chapter 1. The birth of the gods in the beginning of time, when the universe was nothing but an infinite void known as Ginnungagap. Two opposing realms existed, Muspelheim, the land of eternal fire, and Niflheim, the realm of perpetual ice. The heat of Muspelheim and the cold of Niflheim met at the center of Ginnungagap, and from this encounter emerged Ymir, the primordial giant, and Audumla, the cosmic cow. Ymir, the ancestor of all giants, was created from the drops of water that dripped from the melting ice. Audumla, in turn, licked the blocks of salty ice, and from her tongue emerged Buri, the first of the gods. Buri had a son named Bor, who married Bestla, a giantess. From this union were born three powerful sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These three brothers were destined to shape the fate of the universe. They grew strong and wise, and soon realized that Ymir posed a threat to the balance of the cosmos. With courage and determination, Odin, Vili, and Ve confronted Ymir and killed him. From Ymir's body they created the world. His flesh became the earth, his blood turned into the seas and lakes, his bones became the mountains, and his teeth and bone fragments turned into stones and pebbles. Ymir's skull was cast into the sky, forming the celestial vault, and the sparks of Muspelheim were placed in the sky to illuminate the world, becoming the stars. With the world created, Odin, Vili, and Ve decided to populate it. While walking along the beach, they found two trees, an ash and an elm. Odin gave them life and spirit. Vili gave them movement and intelligence, and Veifam gave them form and speech. Thus Ask and Embla, the first humans, were born, becoming the ancestors of all humanity. The gods also created a home for themselves, Asgard, a celestial realm connected to Earth by a rainbow bridge called Bifrost. Asgard was a place of beauty and splendor where the gods lived in harmony and ruled the universe with wisdom and justice. Chapter 2. The Golden Age of the Gods with. The world created and humans populating Midgard, the gods of Asgard began to establish order and justice. Odin, the father of all gods, was the wisest and most powerful. He possessed a throne called Hlidskjalf, from where he could observe all 9 realms. Odin also had 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, who flew around the world and brought him news of everything that happened. His son, Thor, was the god of thunder and the protector of Asgard and Midgard. Thor possessed a magical hammer called Mjolnir, which could destroy mountains and annihilate giants with a single blow. Thor spent most of his time traveling through Midgard and other realms, facing giants and monsters that threatened the peace. His adventures were legendary, and his name was feared by all the enemies of Asgard. On one of his many journeys, Thor faced Jormungandr, the world serpent, who lived in the ocean and was so large that it encircled Midgard. Thor and Jormungandr fought fiercely, but in the end both retreated, knowing that their final destiny would be decided at Ragnarok. While Thor protected the realms, Loki, the god of mischief, caused trouble and conflict among the gods. Loki was the son of a giant, but was adopted by Odin and raised in Asgard. He was cunning and deceitful, and his pranks often put the gods in trouble. However, Loki also used his intelligence to help the gods on various occasions. On one of these occasions, Loki helped Thor recover his hammer Mjolnir, which had been stolen by the giant Thrym. Loki and Thor traveled to the land of the giants, and Loki, using his cunning, managed to trick Thrym and recover the hammer. Despite his pranks, Loki was an important part of the gods' family. He married Sigyn, a loyal and loving goddess, and had 2 sons, Narfi and Vali. However, Loki also had other children with the giantess Angerboda, including Fenrir, the giant wolf, and Jormungandr, the world serpent. These children were destined to play a crucial role in Ragnarok, the end of times. Chapter 3. The omens of Ragnarok's. Time passed, the gods began to notice signs that Ragnarok, the end of times, was approaching. Baldur, the god of light and purity, began to have premonitory dreams of his own death. Baldur was loved by all the gods and living beings, and his death would be a sign of the beginning of Ragnarok. Concerned about Baldur's dreams, his mother, Frigg, made all things in the world swear not to harm him. She traveled through all 9 realms, asking every creature, plant, and object to promise not to hurt Baldur. All swore not to harm Baldur, except for the mistletoe, which Frigg considered harmless and did not ask for the oath. When the gods learned that Baldur was invulnerable, they began to play by throwing objects at him, knowing he would not be harmed. Loki, however, discovered that the mistletoe had not sworn not to harm Baldur. He made an arrow from mistletoe and gave it to Hoder, the blind god and Baldur's brother. Loki guided Hoder's hand and made him shoot the arrow at Baldur, killing him instantly. Baldur's death plunged the gods into mourning and despair. They knew that Baldur's death was a sign that Ragnarok was near. Odin, in his quest for knowledge, consulted the seeress called Volva, who revealed to him the events that would lead to Ragnarok. She prophesied that Loki would break free from his chains and led the giants and monsters against the gods. She also prophesied that many gods would die in the final battle, including Odin, Thor, and Loki. Determined to prevent Ragnarok, Odin ordered that Loki be captured and punished for his role in Baldur's death. Loki was chained in a cave where a serpent dripped venom onto his face. Sigyn, Loki's loyal wife, stayed by his side, holding a container to catch the venom and relieve his pain. However, whenever the container filled up and she needed to empty it, the venom fell onto Loki's face, causing him unbearable pain. Loki remained chained until the day of Ragnarok, when he would break free and lead the forces of chaos against the gods. Chapter 4. The beginning of Ragnarokas. The signs of Ragnarok became more evident. The world began to plunge into chaos. The sun and the moon were devoured by the wolves, Skoll and Hati, plunging the world into darkness. The stars disappeared. From the sky and the earth trembled with violent earthquakes. 3 consecutive winters, known as Fimbulvetur, ravaged the world without an intervening summer. The snow fell incessantly, and the ice covered the land, making life increasingly difficult for humans and the creatures of Midgard. As the world froze, the bonds that kept Loki chained began to break. With a roar of triumph, Loki freed himself from his chains and emerged from his underground prison. His face was contorted with rage and pain, and his eyes gleamed with a desire for revenge. Loki knew that Ragnarok was near, and that it was his time to lead the forces of chaos against the gods of Asgard. Loki gathered an army of giants, monsters, and creatures of darkness. Fenrir, the giant wolf and son of Loki, who had been chained by the gods, also freed himself and joined his father's army. Jormungandr, the world serpent, emerged from the depths of the ocean, ready to face Thor in a final battle. The dead from the realm of Hel, led by the goddess Hel, also joined Loki's forces, eager to avenge themselves on the living. As the forces of chaos gathered, the gods of Asgard prepared for the final battle. Odin, the father of all gods, summoned his warriors and allies to join him in Asgard. He knew that Ragnarok was inevitable, and that many gods would die in the battle, but he was determined to fight to the end. Thor, the god of thunder, wielded his hammer Mjolnir and vowed to protect Asgard and Midgard until his last breath. Heimdall, the watchman of the gods, blew the Gjallarhorn, the horn that echoed through all 9 realms, summoning the gods and heroes to battle. Chapter 5. The Battle of Ragnarok. The field of Vigrid, a vast plain stretching for hundreds of miles, was the stage for the final battle between the gods and the forces of chaos. As the armies approached, the air was filled with tension and anticipation. Odin, mounted on his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, led the gods of Asgard. He wore his golden helmet and wielded his spear Gungnir, which shone with a celestial light. By his side were Thor, Heimdall, Tyr, and the other gods, all ready to face their destiny. On the other side of the field, Loki led his army of giants, monsters, and the undead. Fenrir, with his flaming eyes and sharp teeth, advanced at the forefront of the army, eager to face the gods. Jormungandr, the world serpent, slithered across the ground, his scaly body gleaming with deadly venom. Hel, the goddess of the underworld, led the dead, her empty eyes and pale skin inspiring terror in all who saw her. The battle began with a deafening roar as the two armies clashed in the center of the field. The gods and the giants fought with a ferocity never seen before, their blows echoing through the air. Thor faced Jormungandr in an epic battle, their hammers and venom clashing in a deadly dance. Heimdall faced Loki in a duel of swords, their strikes swift and precise. Odin faced Fenrir, his spear shining with celestial light as he tried to contain the giant wolf. As the battle raged on, the gods began to fall one by one. Tyr, the god of war, was killed by Garm, the guard dog of the underworld. Heimdall and Loki killed each other in their final duel. Thor managed to kill Jormungandr with a final blow of his hammer, but succumbed to the serpent's venom moments later. Odin was devoured by Fenrir, but his son Vidar managed to kill the giant wolf, avenging his father's death. Chapter 6. The rebirth as the Battle of Ragnarok came to an end. The world was consumed by fire and sank into the sea. The land was submerged, and life seemed to have come to an end. However, from the depths of chaos, a new world began to emerge. The land rose again from the sea, green and fertile, as if reborn from the ashes of the old world. The few gods who survived Ragnarok, such as Vidar and Vali, returned to Asgard, determined to rebuild their home and restore order. Two humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, who had hidden in the forest of Hodmimis during the battle, emerged from their hiding place and found a renewed world. They became the ancestors of a new humanity, repopulating the earth and beginning a new cycle of life. The surviving gods ruled once again, and life continued, with the promise of a better and brighter future. As the new world flourished, the gods and humans learned from the mistakes of the past and worked together to create a future of peace and prosperity. Ragnarok had been an end, but also a new beginning, a rebirth that brought hope and renewal to all the realms. Chapter 7. The Prophecy and Preparation. Before the onset of Ragnarok, the gods of Asgard were aware of the prophecies foretelling the end of times. Odin, in his relentless pursuit of knowledge, had consulted the Volva, a seer who revealed to him the events leading to Ragnarok. The Volva prophesied that the world would be plunged into chaos, that the gods would face their enemies in a final battle, and that many of them would perish. Odin, determined to prepare for the inevitable, gathered the gods and the heroes of Midgard to discuss strategies and strengthen their defenses. The gods knew that Loki, Fenrir, Jormungandr, and the forces of chaos posed an imminent threat. They fortified the walls of Asgard, trained their armies, and forged powerful weapons. Thor, the god of thunder, spent days and nights forging and perfecting his hammer, Mjolnir, ensuring it was ready to face Jormungandr. Heimdall, the watchman of the gods, remained vigilant, observing the 9 realms for signs of danger. Tyr, the god of war, trained the warriors of Asgard, preparing them for the final battle. As the gods prepared, the humans of Midgard also sensed the approach of Ragnarok. They observed the signs in the sky and on the earth, and many of them gathered around their leaders and heroes, determined to fight alongside the gods. The humans knew that Ragnarok would bring destruction, but also hope for a new beginning. They prepared to face the chaos, uniting forces with the gods to protect the world they knew. Chapter 8. The Last Gathering of the Gods. As the signs of Ragnarok became more evident, Odin called for a final gathering of the gods in Asgard. He assembled the gods in the great hall of Valhalla, where the heroes fallen in battle gathered to feast and prepare for Ragnarok. Odin, with his wisdom and authority, spoke to the gods about the importance of uniting and facing destiny with courage and honor. He reminded the gods that Ragnarok was not just an end, but also a new beginning. He spoke of the Volva's prophecy, which announced the rebirth of the world and the survival of some gods and humans. Odin encouraged the gods to fight bravely, to protect Asgard and Midgard, and to ensure that life continued after Ragnarok. The gods, inspired by Odin's words, vowed to fight to the end and protect the world they loved. They knew that Ragnarok would bring destruction, but also hope for a better future. They prepared for the final battle, determined to face destiny with courage and honor. Chapter 9. The Final Battle. The day of Ragnarok arrived, and the world was plunged into chaos. The sun and the moon were devoured by the wolves Skoll and Hati, and the stars disappeared from the sky. The earth trembled with violent earthquakes, and the seas overflowed, flooding the land. The gods and the humans gathered on the field of Vigrid, ready to face the forces of chaos. Loki, freed from his chains, led an army of giants, monsters, and the undead. Fenrir, the giant wolf, advanced at the forefront of the army, eager to face the gods. Jormungandr, the world serpent, emerged from the depths of the ocean, ready to face Thor in a final battle. Hel, the goddess of the underworld, led the dead, her empty eyes and pale skin inspiring terror in all who saw her. The gods and the humans fought bravely, facing the forces of chaos with courage and determination. Thor faced Jormungandr in an epic battle, their hammers and venom clashing in a deadly dance. Heimdall faced Loki in a duel of swords, their strikes swift and precise. Odin faced Fenrir, his spear shining with celestial light as he tried to contain the giant wolf. As the battle raged on, the gods began to fall one by one. Tyr, the god of war, was killed by Garm, the guard dog of the underworld. Heimdall and Loki killed each other in their final duel. Thor managed to kill Jormungandr with a final blow of his hammer, but succumbed to the serpent's venom moments later. Odin was devoured by Fenrir, but his son Vidar managed to kill the giant wolf, avenging his father's death. Chapter 10. The Rebirth and Hope Is. The Battle of Ragnarok came to an end. The world was consumed by fire and sank into the sea. The land was submerged, and life seemed to have come to an end. However, from the depths of chaos, a new world began to emerge. The land rose again from the sea, green and fertile, as if reborn from the ashes of the old world. The few gods who survived Ragnarok, such as Vidar and Vali, returned to Asgard, determined to rebuild their home and restore order. Two humans, Leif and Lifthrasir, who had hidden in the forest of Hodmimus during the battle, emerged from their hiding place and found a renewed world. They became the ancestors of a new humanity, repopulating the earth and beginning a new cycle of life. The surviving gods ruled once again, and life continued with the promise of a better and brighter future. As the new world flourished, the Oi gods and humans learned from the mistakes of the past and worked together to create a future of peace and prosperity. Ragnarok had been an end, but also a new beginning, a rebirth that brought hope and renewal to all the realms. The gods and humans, united in their determination to protect the world, ensured that life continued and that hope never faded. Chapter 11. The Final Prophecy. As the gods prepared for the final battle, Odin decided to consult the Volva once more, hoping to obtain more information about the future. He traveled to the well of Urd, where the Volva resided, and asked her to reveal more details about Ragnarök and the rebirth of the world. The Volva, with her piercing eyes and mysterious voice, revealed to Odin that Ragnarök would not only be an end but also a new beginning. She prophesied that after the destruction of the world, a new world would emerge from the ashes, green and fertile. She spoke of the survival of some gods and humans who would repopulate the earth and begin a new cycle of life. The Volva also revealed that the surviving gods would rule again, and that life would continue with the promise of a better and brighter future. Odin, inspired by the Volva's words, returned to Asgard and shared his findings with the other gods. He encouraged them to fight bravely and protect the world they loved, ensuring that life would continue after Ragnarök. The gods, determined to face destiny with courage and honor, prepared for the final battle. Chapter 12. The Final Battle. The day of Ragnarök arrived, and the world was plunged into chaos. The sun and the moon were devoured by the wolves Skoll and Hati, and the stars disappeared from the sky. The earth trembled with violent earthquakes, and the seas overflowed, flooding the land. The gods and the humans gathered on the field of Vigrid, ready to face the forces of chaos. Loki, freed from his chains, led an army of giants, monsters, and the undead. Fenrir, the giant wolf, advanced at the forefront of the army, eager to face the gods. Jormungandr, the world serpent, emerged from the depths of the ocean, ready to face Thor in a final battle. Hel, the goddess of the underworld, led the dead, her empty eyes and pale skin inspiring terror in all who saw her. The gods and the humans fought bravely, facing the forces of chaos with courage and determination. Thor faced Jormungandr in an epic battle, their hammers and venom clashing in a deadly dance. Heimdall faced Loki in a duel of swords, their strikes swift and precise. Odin faced Fenrir, his spear shining with celestial light as he tried to contain the giant wolf. As the battle raged on, the gods began to fall one by one. Tyr, the god of war, was killed by Garm, the guard dog of the underworld. Heimdall and Loki killed each other in their final duel. Thor managed to kill Jormungandr with a final blow of his hammer, but succumbed to the serpent's venom moments later. Odin was devoured by Fenrir, but his son Vidar managed to kill the giant wolf, avenging his father's death. Chapter 13. The New World as. The Battle of Ragnarök came to an end. The world was consumed by fire and sank into the sea. The land was submerged, and life seemed to have come to an end. However, from the depths of chaos, a new world began to emerge. The land rose again from the sea, green and fertile, as if reborn from the ashes of the old world. The few gods who survived Ragnarök, such as Vidar and Vali, returned to Asgard, determined to rebuild their home and restore order. Two humans, Leif and Lifthrasir, who had hidden in the forest of Hodmimus during the battle, emerged from their hiding place and found a renewed world. They became the ancestors of a new humanity, repopulating the earth and beginning a new cycle of life. The surviving gods ruled once again, and life continued with the promise of a better and brighter future. As the new world flourished, the Eye-Wipe gods and humans learned from the mistakes of the past and worked together to create a future of peace and prosperity. Ragnarök had been an end, but also a new beginning, a rebirth that brought hope and renewal to all the realms. The gods and humans, united in their determination to protect the world, ensured that life continued, and that hope never faded. Chapter 14. The New Era. With the rebirth of the world, the gods and humans began to build a new era of peace and prosperity. The surviving gods, led by Vidar and Vali, worked together to restore order and justice in Asgard and Midgard. They created new laws and traditions, ensuring that the new world was governed with wisdom and balance. The humans, led by Leif and Lifthrasir, repopulated the earth, and created new communities and cultures. They learned from the mistakes of the past and worked together to create a better and brighter future. The gods and humans, united in their determination to protect the world, ensured that life continued and that hope never faded. As the new era flourished, the gods and humans celebrated the renewal of the world and the promise of a better future. They created festivals and ceremonies to honor the fallen gods and celebrate life and hope. Ragnarok had been an end, but also a new beginning, a rebirth that brought hope and renewal to all the realms. Chapter 15. The Alliance Between Gods and Humans. With the rebirth of the world, the gods and humans realized the importance of working together to ensure the survival and prosperity of the new world. Vidar and Vali, the surviving gods, established an alliance with Lif and Lifthrassir, the ancestors of the new humanity. They promised to protect and guide the humans, while the humans promised to honor and respect the gods. The gods and humans worked together to rebuild Asgard and Midgard, creating new cities and communities. They established new laws and traditions, ensuring that the new world was governed with wisdom and justice. The gods shared their knowledge and wisdom with the humans, teaching them the arts of war, agriculture, and healing. The humans, in turn, shared their creativity and skills with the gods, creating new forms of art, music, and literature. They celebrated life and hope, creating festivals and ceremonies to honor the gods and celebrate the renewal of the world. The alliance between gods and humans ensured that the new world flourished, and that life continued with the promise of a better and brighter future. Chapter 16. The discovery of new territories. As the new world flourished, humans began to explore and discover new territories. They traveled through unknown lands, encountering new cultures and civilizations. The gods, led by Vidar and Vali, accompanied the humans on their journeys, protecting and guiding them in their discoveries. The humans discovered new fertile lands where they could cultivate and create new communities. They found valuable resources such as metals and precious stones, which they used to create new technologies and works of art. The gods, with their wisdom and power, helped the humans overcome the challenges and dangers they encountered on their journeys. As the humans explored and discovered new territories, they created maps and records of their discoveries. They shared their knowledge with the gods and other human communities, ensuring that the new world was connected and united. The discovery of new territories brought prosperity and growth to the new world and ensured that life continued with the promise of a better and brighter future. Chapter 17. The Building of New Cities. With the discovery of new territories, humans began to build new cities and communities. They used the resources they found to create houses, temples, and monuments. The gods, led by Vidar and Vali, helped the humans plan and build their cities, ensuring they were safe and prosperous. The humans created new forms of architecture and design inspired by the beauty and grandeur of Asgard. They built temples to honor the gods and monuments to celebrate life and hope. The gods, in turn, blessed the new cities and communities, ensuring they were protected and blessed. As the new cities were built, humans created new forms of government and social organization. They established leaders and councils, ensuring their communities were governed with wisdom and justice. The gods, with their experience and knowledge, helped the humans create laws and traditions, ensuring the new world was governed with balance and harmony. Chapter 18. The Celebration of Life. With the new world flourishing and prospering, the gods and humans celebrated life and hope. They created festivals and ceremonies to honor the fallen gods and celebrate the renewal of the world. The gods and humans gathered in grand celebrations where they shared stories, music, and dances. The humans created new forms of art and expression, inspired by the beauty and grandeur of the new world. They painted murals and sculptures, created music and poetry, and wrote stories and legends. The gods, in turn, shared their wisdom and knowledge with the humans, ensuring that the art and culture of the New World were rich and diverse. As life was celebrated, the gods and humans created new traditions and rituals. They established ceremonies to honor the gods and celebrate life, ensuring that the New World was connected and united. The celebration of life brought joy and hope to the New World and ensured that life continued with the promise of a better and brighter future. Chapter 19, The Art of War, Part 1. After the fall of the walls of Furgard and the return of the reborn gods to the New World, an era of reconstruction began. But with the new era also came a new kind of threat, no longer made of ancient monsters or dark prophecies, but from the very heart of men. The world now shared between humans and gods needed order, wisdom, and strength. It was then that Tyr, the god of war and justice, took on a central role. His single remaining arm, sacrificed ages ago to the wolf Fenrir, now symbolized more than courage. It was the seal of a new code of conduct. Tyr no longer wanted disordered wars or conquests for power. He saw in war an instrument of balance, a right, an art. Gathering the greatest warriors from the human clans and the generals of the celestial armies, Tyr founded the School of the Golden Spear, a center for training, philosophy, and martial discipline. There, the teachings of war were passed on with reverence, not as instruments of destruction, but as a dance of survival and order. The sword that strikes without honor is like the tongue that lies. It destroys what it should protect. Tyr would say to his students, at the school, each discipline was divided into 5 pillars. Discipline. The body does not command the spirit commands the body. Loyalty. One never fights for oneself, but for something greater. Strategy. The mind must always win before the arm. Respect. Even the enemy must be recognized for their courage. Balance. War must end before hatred begins. Alongside him came other gods with specific skills. Freya, goddess of love and war, trained the warrior women in tactical combat with an emphasis on agility and instinct. Bragi, god of poetry, taught the use of voice and silence in moments of conflict, for even speech could be a weapon. And Vidar, the Silent One, showed how patience could overcome even brute force. The fame of the school spread. People from distant lands came to send their sons and daughters, hoping they would learn more than just how to wield a blade. In a short time, the graduates of the Golden Spear became defenders of cities, mediators of conflicts, and guardians of trade routes. But not everyone viewed the elevation of war to an art favorably. In isolated regions, remnants of ancient orders of chaos and violence organized in the shadows. One of them was Morthak, an ancient mortal warrior who had been corrupted by fragments of the essence of Surtur, the fire giant killed in Ragnarok. With armor made of black scales and a flaming eye that never slept, Morthak created a new philosophy. War as total liberation, where the strongest imposes the truth. With his followers, the Sons of Ash, Morthak began to gather forgotten war artifacts and corrupt lost warriors, offering power in exchange for their souls. News of devastated villages, captured cities, and dark pacts reached Tyr. He knew that the true test of his school and his teachings was approaching. Action was necessary, but it had to be taken with wisdom. Chapter 19, The Art of War, Part 2. The assembly of the gods was convened in Esmir, the city suspended in the skies, built after the rebirth of the world. Tyr presented himself before the new celestial council, now composed of reborn ancient gods and new human representatives who had ascended due to their deeds. War has changed, but the enemies persist, said Tyr. If we allow Morthak, To spread his doctrine of blind fury, everything we have rebuilt will be reduced to ashes. Odin, reincarnated with the wisdom of the ages, now in a young body but with eyes that reflected the stars, raised his voice. Fire cannot be conquered with steel alone. It will take more than spears and swords. It was then that the mission of the Seven Shields was born, a group formed by 7 warriors, 4 humans and 3 demigods, who would be trained not only in the art of war but also in diplomacy, magic, and leadership. They would be the special envoys of the School of the Golden Spear to prevent, contain, and, when necessary, confront the Sons of Ash. The group was led by Kale, son of a blacksmith and a priestess, with the gift of seeing the flows of destiny. With him were Ilya, an archer with golden eyes, a direct descendant of Freya; Torvik, a barbarian tamed by Tyr's philosophy; Arion, a mage and strategist, apprentice of Bragi; Fanar, son of mortals, but blessed by Heimdall with enhanced senses; Lisa, bearer of the shield of forgotten runes, which could reflect magic; Druan, a mute warrior who communicated only through gestures and glances, but whose steps could silence armies. Each of them was sent to a corner of the world, where Morthak's influence grew like weeds in fertile soil. Chapter 20. The 7 Shields Kyle went north to the city of Valderheim, where rumors said the Sons of Ash were corrupting the children of kings with promises of power. There he faced not only warriors but the dirty politics of human courts. He discovered that the fire of war sometimes burned stronger in gilded halls than on battlefields. Ilya was sent east, where an ancient ash dragon, once dormant, had been awakened with black runes. Using precision, calm, and inherited magic, she faced the creature in a silent valley. Her enchanted arrow struck the dragon's heart, sealing its spirit once more. Torvik went south, where entire tribes had bowed to Morthak's philosophy. He did not confront them with violence, but challenged their leaders in ritualistic duels, winning not by strength, but by honor, restoring the true meaning of war. Meanwhile, Morthak continued his rise, gathering the fragments of Surtur's flaming sword. With each piece recovered, his power grew, and his eyes burned like 2 suns of destruction. Chapter 21. The ancient fire at a buried temple. Morthak finds the last fragment of the Twilight Sword, the weapon that had helped Surtur set the skies ablaze in the original Ragnarok. As he wields it, a roar echoes through the world like an ancestral thunder. The earth trembles, the winds blow backward, and even the gods feel the vibration in their souls. It is the reincarnation of the primordial fire. The world begins to change. New volcanoes emerge, ash storms cover the sky in isolated regions, and a new era of terror seems imminent. Morthak declares himself the new judge of war, openly challenging the gods to accept his vision or perish by it. Chapter 22. The celestial conspiracy among the gods. Disagreements arise. Not all agree with direct interference in the world of mortals. Loki, freed after the rebirth but watched, begins to spread ideas among the lesser gods. He whispers that Morthak is merely a consequence of divine arrogance. Meanwhile, Frigg, the goddess of fate, reveals to Tyr a new prophecy. The approaching war will be won not by strength, but by renunciation. Tyr, confused, begins to question his own doctrine. Is preparing the world for war actually provoking it? Chapter 23. The Runes of the Endarian discovers in ancient ruins a set of forgotten runes, the runes of negation, capable of undoing magic, weapons, and even destinies. She takes them to Asmir, but Loki intercepts them with his tricks and delivers part of them to Morthak, hoping to see chaos grow. With the runes, Morthak begins to create warriors invulnerable to the gods' magic. Even the strongest feel that the balance is crumbling. Chapter 24. The siege of Esmir. The sons of Ash launch a direct attack on Esmir. For the first time since the reconstruction, the sacred city is threatened. The battle is titanic. Enchanted dragons, soldiers of black runes, and storms invoked by Morthak collide against the celestial walls. Tyr leads the defense, but suffers a terrible blow from Morthak that destroys his mythical spear. Kyle saves his life at the last moment, but the gods' morale is shaken. The city is protected, but the victory comes at a high cost. Many lesser gods fall, and the people's trust begins to wane. Chapter 25. The fall of Agadon. The days following the siege, Njord, god of the seas, attempts to mediate a truce with Morthak, but he is ambushed and killed, and his body is sent adrift on a burning ship. The message is clear: there will be no peace. The sea revolts, immense storms swallow ships for weeks, and the balance of the elements begins to unravel. Chapter 26. The Bile. Echoes of Midgard. In Midgard, humans begin to divide. Some follow the gods. Others, attracted by power or desperation, follow Morthak. A cult called the Black Flame emerges, preaching the destruction of all divine hierarchy. They infiltrate among peoples, sabotage cities, and assassinate masters of the Golden Spear. Kyle begins to question the mission of the Seven Shields. Are they winning or merely delaying the inevitable? Chapter 27. The judgment of Loki. Loki is finally accused of treason after evidence of his alliance with Morthak. He is brought to trial before all the gods and human representatives, but, as always, his words are sharp as knives. You created a new world and repeated the same mistakes. I am merely the mirror. Even condemned Loki laughs. Something in him seems calm, as if everything is going exactly as he planned. Chapter 28. The path of light and shadow. Faced with growing despair, Balder, the reborn god of light, proposes a new alliance, uniting gods, humans, and even repentant dissidents for a common cause. He and Kale embark on a journey around the world to gather old allies, seek new magics, and rebuild hope. Meanwhile, Morthak isolates himself on the throne of ashes, preparing a final ritual to transform himself into something beyond a god, an eternal concept of destruction. Chapter 29. The journey of the two sons' wars and betrayals had left the world in silent ruins. Where once echoed the songs of celebrations and the trumpets of glory, now only the wind walked freely among fallen columns, broken temples, cities that exhaled the scent of fear. Balder and Kyle walked together through these ruins, light and steel united, hope and duty fused in a desperate journey. One was called the Just Sun, and the other the Blind Sun, for Balder illuminated the paths with faith and kindness, while Kyle saw the dark paths, the shortcuts of destiny, the truths that the gods feared to look at. Do you still believe this can be reversed? Asked Kyle, observing the bodies of warriors marked with the rune of negation, symbols of the sons of Ash. Balder did not respond immediately. He knelt beside one of the bodies, touched its forehead, and murmured a prayer in a low voice. The skin of the dead lit up for an instant, and then dissolved into golden particles that scattered in the wind like seeds. As long as there is something to save, yes, I still believe. Their mission was clear: to gather the fragments of Ljóstyrka, the ancient jewel that sealed the balance between light and chaos. After the Ragnarok, it had been shattered, and its fragments fell into distinct realms, protected by challenges of body, mind, and soul. These fragments, legend said, had been created even before the gods, when the universe was but a song. Thikapa. First stop, the eternal library of Mimir. Guided by joint visions, Balder and Kale followed to the far north, where the mountains whispered secrets in icy winds. At the top of Peak Lager, where the stars seemed closer than the earth, lay the library of Mimir, guardian of forbidden knowledge. There, beneath 1,000 layers of ice and silence, the first fragment of Ljostyrka was hidden, guarded by Kravnir, the spirit of forgetfulness. To enter the library, one had to give up their most valuable memory. Balder hesitated. If I lose this, I will no longer be me. Kyle, however, had already decided. He offered his most intimate memory, the face of his mother. In return, the door opened, silent as an old regret. The hall was formed by glass pillars, where books floated by themselves, whispering forgotten stories. In the center, the fragment floated in a sphere of blue light, suspended by ethereal chains made of ancient words. Kravnir appeared, a faceless entity made of paper and silence. You may take the fragment, but it only shines for those who understand their pain. Balder touched the crystal and for an instant saw all possible futures, every defeat, every wrong choice, every loss that awaited him. And yet he smiled. Pain only hurts when we deny its lesson. The light recognized him. The fragment was absorbed into his chest, illuminating his veins like solar rivers. Kyle, beside him, fell to his knees. Losing the memory of his mother was eating away at his soul. Balder extended his hand. Pain cannot be forgotten, but it can be transformed. The second fragment, the abyss of Skur, following the maps of the runes sung by Bragi, they descended to the south, to the territory of Skur, the abyss where the world had almost split after the end of Ragnarok. There, the second fragment had fallen into the hands of an ancient forgotten race, the Dolnari, creatures that lived in the shadows of time, feeding on regrets. The entrance to the abyss was alive, a portal that bled memories. As they crossed it, Balder and Kale felt themselves pulled by visions of their failures. Kale saw the city of Valderheim, which he had failed to save. He saw the people burning. He saw the look of disappointment from Tyr. Balder saw the death of Njord and his helplessness in not being able to prevent it. He saw Esmir fall even under his light. He saw Loki laughing as the gods corroded in their own pride. In the center of the abyss, the fragment floated, but surrounded by the shadows of the unsaved, entities formed by the mistakes of those who dared to seek the light without first facing the darkness. The fight was mental. Each shadow was an echo of their own conscience. Balder fell, wounded by words that only he could have said to himself. Kyle, on the other hand, remembered something that not even the Dolnari expected. He had nothing left to lose. He had already lost everything. His pain was his armor. He advanced with the blade of the golden spear in hand and cleared a path to the fragment. Upon touching it, the shadows dissipated. The abyss fell silent. Balder, fallen, looked at Kale. You are no longer afraid of yourself. Kale merely nodded. Because now I know myself. The rise of the shadow as Balder and Kale sought the fragments, Morthak advanced without resistance. The remaining cities now bowed to him, not out of fear, but by choice. His speech was powerful. The gods have failed. Men are tired of being pieces on a celestial chessboard. Follow me, and you will know a world without destiny. He had become more than a warrior. He was now a living ideology. By fusing the runes of negation with Surtur's sword, he created the flame of the end, an eternal bonfire that burned the very fabric of reality. And around it he began the construction of his capital, Umbral, a fortress forge where everything was transformed into an instrument of war. There, he began to prepare the ritual of transfiguration, which would make him the first being to exist outside of time, outside the laws of the universe. Neither God nor man, pure will alone. The voices that awaken. Meanwhile, rumors spread through Midgard and beyond. They said that a child born under a double eclipse, a symbol of balance between light and darkness, had spoken words that no being had taught. When the fire extinguishes the sky and the echo of the last name is whispered in the ice. 7 echoes will be reborn. This child, named Elvar, was soon taken to the school of the Golden Spear, now led by Arion, who began to gather the last defenders of the world. 7 young people were chosen to inherit the teachings of the original 7 shields. For a new generation would have to fight for the soul of the world. And high in the clouds, in silence, Odin contemplated. His left eye burned golden, the right in ashes. He knew. The end was not the destiny. The end was a choice. Chapter 30. The return of the serpent. The stars no longer shone with the same vigor. The firmament, once filled with constellations, celebrated by poets and seers, was now covered by a curtain of ancestral smoke. From the heart of Umbral, Morthak's capital, a living smoke rose, a black serpent that slowly coiled around the world, suffocating hope with each turn. But there was a whisper among the ancients. Jörmungandr, the world serpent, dead in the Ragnarök, had not truly disappeared. Her spirit had been sealed beneath the icy waters of the deep north. And now, with the world once again in imbalance, she stirred. Kyle and Balder, guided by an unnamed call, set out to the frozen sea. They sailed on a ship of living wood, shaped by the artisans of Yggdrasil, and held in their hands 2 fragments of the Ljóstyrka, which pulsed with light and shadow. On the horizon the water boiled. Geysers of salt and fury rose from the depths. Time seemed to waver, as if the past and future folded around a specific point. It was there that they saw the fissure in the depths, a spiral abyss that turned slowly, sucking the very logic of the sea. And within it the eyes of Jörmungandr, reopened, pale, milky, immense as twin moons. But she was not alone. Morthak, in his arrogance, had also sensed the presence of the creature. He sent his generals, the 4 Foci, living winds created by his alchemists, to imprison the serpent's spirit and channel its power to Umbral. The race for the serpent Balder knew. If Jörmungandr fell into the wrong hands, the world would be swallowed once and for all. There would be no land, no sky, only the cycle of eternal destruction. Kale led the attack on Morthak's Foci. The first, Caligon, was a tornado of fire and shadow, eternally spinning. Kale lured it to the nearby mountains, and there, with the help of Elia, now reborn as the guardian of the vortex arrow, slew it with an arrow made of pure frozen light. The second Cyrith was a cyclone that whispered doubts in the mind. Balder faced it with hymns of purity, sung in a forgotten language, and dispersed it by opening his chest and exposing the fragment of the Ljóstyrka, now pulsating. The other 2, Melkar and Tain, merged into a single storm and were fought by the combined forces of the sea peoples, ancient clans that for generations had been loyal to Njord. For the first time since the death of the sea god, they raised war banners. At the end of the battle, the serpent looked at Kyle and Balder, and in a rare gesture bowed over the waters, offering them one of her ancestral scales, an artifact that contained memories of forgotten eras, even before the gods, the testimony of the scale upon touching the scale Kyle saw. Not a dream, but a time outside of time. He saw the world before form. He saw nameless entities shaping realities with songs, weaving time into spirals of meanings. And he saw a being, the first silence. This being was neither god nor creature, it was absolute absence. And Jörmungandr was its spark, exiled into the physical world to prevent creation from returning to the void. What Morthak wanted was not power. It was to erase the meaning of existence. "He wants to become the original silence," murmured Kyle, his voice trembling. Balder fell to his knees. The revelation was so great that his eyes bled light. If this is true, not even the gods can resist. We need something that transcends even us. The Council of the Rootsback, On land, they convened a council never before seen. The three founding races, humans, gods, and the Ekund, the first elementals, shaped directly by Yggdrasil, who had exiled themselves underground after the Ragnarök. In the city of Nerith, built upon roots of living stone, the meeting took place. Among those present, Arion, now Grand Master of the Golden Spear, Fenar, leader of the sentinel troops of the world's edges, Lisa, protector of the Mist Wall, Druun, who since his last battle had not set foot on living soil, now reappeared, his body covered in living runes, Thorion, king of the Ekund, with a voice that made trees flourish when heard. The decisions were swift and unanimous. All forces had to be gathered to prevent the ritual of transfiguration. But first, they had to gather all the fragments of the Ljósstyrka, for only it could seal the silence. The remaining fragments were scattered, one in the heart of a submerged city protected by living memories, another in the ruins of Asgard, where matter and time blurred, and the last in the heart of Umbral, guarded by Morthak's own blade, the bearers of the light. A new group was formed, no longer the seven shields, but the bearers of the fractal light, warriors and sages, humans and gods, united by an ideal greater than survival, the reinvention of existence. Kael was named Herald of the Last Hope. Balder, now weakened, became the guardian of memory. His mission was to ensure that even if everything crumbled, someone would remember what the world could be. Meanwhile, the serpent's shadow continued to rise into the skies, enveloping the stars. The sky became a dark mirror. The stars disappeared, Umbral roared, and Morthak, chanting in a language that predated reality, whispered to the world, "Awaken, silence, return to your throne. Creation has grown weary of being." Chapter 31. The city of drowned memories, the deep waters of the south, where the sun rarely reached, hid more than ruins. There, in the bed of the ocean that the ancients called Skeldar, lay the legendary Thalvellir, the city of drowned memories. It was a place outside of time, built even before the separation of the worlds, where knowledge was not stored in scrolls but in feelings, preserved in the currents of the sea. It was there that Kael and the bearers of the fractal light had to find the next fragment of the Ljósstyrka. The invitation of the currents approaching the city was not simple. The seas that surrounded it were patrolled by creatures called Nyverians, serpentfish with ethereal eyes and translucent bodies, which reacted to the presence of strong memories. To reach Thalvellir, one had to temporarily forget oneself, and only those capable of completely letting go of their own identity could pass through the currents that guarded the submerged gates. Kael, after long years of pain, had no difficulty. The waters welcomed him as if he were a son returning to the maternal womb. For the others, the test almost cost some their lives. Eilina, bearer of the third fragment absorbed earlier, nearly drowned in her own childhood memories, trapped in a hallucination of the past. She was saved by Therion, the flower-bearing Ekund, who shared part of his vegetal essence to filter her mind and bring her back to the present. Inside the city, Thalvellir was of a strange beauty. Domes made of giant shells, streets of living coral, light fish swimming through aquatic libraries. But there was silence and something somber. There, the Memoriants, beings formed by emotional energy, ruled. They did not speak, only projected images and feelings. Their leader, called Velharn, was an ancient minor god of introspection, forgotten by the peoples of the surface. Velharn greeted them with a projection of blue light. He showed them the location of the fragment. It was in the heart of the city, but protected by a creature called Auskar, an entity formed by the sum of all the painful memories of Thalvellir. He is fed by everything we cannot overcome, projected Velharn. And if you face him, you will face what is deepest within you. The judgment of Auskar, the battle against Auskar, was not fought with weapons. Each of the bearers was taken to an inner reality, forced to relive their most devastating moment. Kell was thrown back to the day he saw the city of Alderheim burn. This time, however, he could hear the screams, feel the skin burn. He could look into the eyes of his sister, Mara, who reached out her flaming hand to him before disappearing. The pain was real. Total. Eilena relived the death of her children. In the War of the Three Seas, Tharion was forced to remember the moment his Ikon brothers were massacred by the Men of Fire and Balder. He saw what was to come. He saw the failure of the journey. He saw Morthak triumph. He saw the skies torn and everything beautiful swallowed by silence. But at that moment, Balder screamed, and his voice echoed through the inner planes. Memory is not a prison. And as he said this, the light of the third fragment shone in his chest, and Auskar screamed with the force of 1,000 freed souls. The city trembled. In the center of Thalvellir, where the pillars of origin lay, the fragment of the Leostyrka emerged like a submerged flower, opening to those who had the courage to carry their pains as part of their strength. Kyle touched it, and instead of pain, he felt acceptance, the return to the surface and the black wind, but the world did not wait. As they emerged from the submerged city, they found the sky torn by a dark wind, the wind of Umbral. Morthak had launched the first, Seal of Rupture, a ritual capable of corroding the boundaries between the realms and merging them into a single plane of pain and entropy. The first effects were already being felt. Time collapsed in different places, turning days into seconds, and centuries passing in minutes. Cities reappeared from the past. People disappeared without explanation. It was the beginning of the collapse of the veils. The bearers had no choice. They now had to go to Asgard, or what remained of it, the trail to Asgard, land of smoke, and specters traveling to Asgard was more than geography. It was a dimensional crossing. After the Ragnarök, the realm of the gods had split into floating islands, enveloped in golden mist and pure lightning. With the help of Lisa, protector of the mist wall, and an ancient artifact called Nautra, the lens of the worlds, the bearers accessed the path of the shattered stars, an interdimensional bridge that defied logic and demanded at each step a piece of the soul. Many were left behind on the path. The young Elvar, who had been trained since his prophecy, showed power beyond expectations. He floated between the steps of space-time as if he were at home. "I am not afraid of the end," he said with blank eyes, "because my name has not yet been written. I am the missing chapter." Upon arriving in Asgard, they saw what remained: broken towers, the throne of the heavens cracked in half, and ghosts of the ancient gods wandering like echoes. In the center, a tree sprouted, the last root of Yggdrasil, growing among the ruins, and there, caught between branches and lightning, was the fourth fragment of the Leostyrka, the guardian of the ruins. To everyone's surprise, Thor lived, but not as before. He had merged with the very essence of Asgard, becoming an elemental being of lightning and vengeance. The god of thunder was now Thorim, the last echo. He had chosen to remain to protect the fragment, even if it meant forgetting who he was. When he saw Balder and Kale, his anger emerged. "You abandoned the house. You strayed from the oath. You will not have the heart of light." The combat was epic. The sky split with eternal thunder. Thor's hammer, now called the Dark Mjolnir, flashed between dimensions. Kale faced him with the golden spear. Balder, with the inner light of 3 fragments. Eilena used a forbidden technique, the symphony of the ancient blood, which allowed her to intertwine her soul with that of the tree and ask it to awaken memories of the old Asgard. In the end, when Thorim recognized Balder's eyes and heard his old name whispered with love, he fell to his knees. "I was waiting for someone to remember me." With electric tears, he handed them the fragment. His eyes shone one last time. make it worth it. 4 fragments, 3 remaining, and a final awakening. Now, with 4 of the 7 fragments gathered, the group felt the weight of responsibility and the growth of Morthak's shadow. Umbral was expanding. Reality was crumbling, and a new entity was awakening on the edges of existence. The first silence, which now began to whisper forbidden names to the ears of mortals, corrupting their souls with promises of liberation through absolute forgetfulness. Kyle felt the pressure of time, not just as a count, but as essence. The world had entered the final stage of the cycle, and the last song had not yet been written. Chapter 32. The Tower of Silent Language. Dawn was never the same again. Since the Seal of Rupture had been activated by Morthak, the very concept of dawn had fragmented. In some regions, the sky remained static in eternal twilight. In others, day, and night dueled every instant, as if time itself was trying to decide whether it was still worth moving forward. However, one place resisted, Varlon. The Tower of Silent Language, the tower that speaks without sound, located in the heart of the ancient desert of Keth Avar. Varlon was a gigantic obelisk made of golden obsidian floating a few meters above the ground. There were no doors, there were no windows, and according to ancient legends, the tower was the point where the physical world touched the language of creation, the original word that gave rise to all realms. The 5th fragment of the Ljostyrk resided there according to Baldur's visions, not as an object, but as an imprisoned sound, waiting to be freed. But to free that sound, one would have to understand the language of silence, an impossible paradox. Until then, the arrival at the desert of Keith Avar. Traveling through Keth Avar was more than a physical journey. The desert had been transformed after the collapse of the veils. Sands danced as if they were musical notes. Time there did not flow linearly. With each step, a memory could be relived or erased. Kyle and the bearers of the fractal light followed with caution. On the 3rd day, one of them disappeared, Ryler, the temporal cartographer. In his place, they found a strange melody, whispering words in a language no one knew, except Baldur. "It is the voice of the seed, the speech before speech," he said, perplexed. As they approached the tower, they realized it was not simply floating. It was singing, and within that song there was a name, Sailor, Sailor, the guardian of the unspoken. Word Sailor was a being that could not be described. His appearance molded to the observer, taking forms that reflected the fears and regrets of those who saw him. To Kyle, he appeared as a youth with empty eyes and ash skin. To Elena, an unborn son, he greeted them with a silent nod of the head. To access the song fragment, you must renounce language. And so began the trial of silence. For 7 days and 7 nights, the bearers were forbidden to speak, think in words, or name anything. It was forbidden to think with language, an almost impossible feat for human beings. Therion, being ikund and more instinctive, was the first to adapt. Elena soon after. But Kale struggled. He fought against the words that came to mind whenever he felt something. How to make sense of love without naming it? How to cry without naming the pain? On the 6th day, he broke. He screamed the name of his deceased sister, Maera, in despair, and then he understood. Silence was not the absence of sound. It was the total presence of listening. By truly silencing himself, Kyle heard, not with his ears, but with his soul. And the song fragment emerged, the song of creation. The tower trembled, a note echoed, a note so pure it made the heavens stop. The desert froze. The memories suspended in the air fell like leaves. The fragment emerged, crystalline, like a tuning fork of light. Kyle held it, and for an instant saw everything, the birth of the first sound, the origin of the word light, the moment when creation chose to be something and not nothing. The power of the fifth fragment was to name the essence. Kyle could now touch the core of any being and know their true nature. But there was a risk. Naming something falsely was to destroy its identity. The gift came with a price, total responsibility. The encounter with the ninth shadow. With 5 fragments gathered, the bearers headed north, guided by increasingly confusing visions. But before they could reach the next region, they were intercepted in the Valley of Gorin, where time collapsed in cycles of 1 second, repeated infinitely. There, a being awaited. It was not Morthak. It was something older, the ninth shadow, fragment of the first silence, embodied as a child with empty eyes and an absent smile. She spoke with the voice of all mothers who had ever lost children. "You want to save the world," said the child, "but you don't know that the world has already been saved. You are the repetition, the simulation, the beautiful mistake." The child extended her hand to Kyle. "Give me the fragments. I promise the pain will end." Kyle hesitated, but Elvar stepped forward. He touched the child's hand and smiled. "The pain does not end. The pain transforms. That's what you don't understand." And with a gesture, he unleashed an explosion of light. The ninth shadow was disintegrated, momentarily, but her eyes remained present in every mirror, in every reflection, whispering, "I am in you." The fall of Elvar. The explosion came at a cost. Elvar, the promising youth, fell. His body seemed intact, but his soul was emptied. "He gave everything he was to protect what he believed in," murmured Aelena. Balder, in tears, held the boy's body. Another martyr, another story without an end. But Kale knelt and placed his hand on Elvar's chest. With the power of the fifth fragment, he tried to name his essence. He searched for something that remained, and found a spark, a nearly forgotten song. "You still are, you still can be," and in a superhuman effort, Kyle redefined Elvar's name. He renamed him with a new identity, one that was reborn from courage and not from fear. The boy's body shone, and his eyes opened. "I am?" "Yes, now it is you who writes your story, the invitation of the dead." Stars in the distance, the sky began to show signs of total collapse. Stars died and flickered as if pleading for help. The gravity of Umbral began to deform the heavens. With 5 fragments gathered, the path to the stairway of the end of worlds finally revealed itself. A trail of stellar energy that connected the planes of existence to the root of the multiverse. There lay the cradle of origin, where the last 2 fragments were guarded, but something awaited them at the top, something that even the gods feared to name. The final song approached, and with it the moment to decide, save the world or free it. Chapter 33. The Stairway of the End of Worlds. The sky was no longer the same. Since the activation of the 5th fragment, the veil between the worlds trembled like an old fabric on the verge of the final tear. And it was in this context that the bearers of the fractal light found themselves facing the entrance to the stairway of the end of worlds, an ancestral path forged before the creation of the gods themselves. The stairway was not made of stone, nor of common energy. Its steps shone, as if each were made of a dead star, condensed and singing its epitaph to the universe. Climbing it was like listening to the sighs of all who had ever existed, and fallen into oblivion. Kyle took the first step, and the world around fell silent, each step a soul. The stairway was not just a path, it was a living trial. With each step, the bearers were transported to memories that did not belong to them. They saw ancient wars, futures that never happened, lives they could have lived. Each step was a bifurcation of the soul, and with each choice, a part of them was left. Behind, Vivtharion faced his past as an Ican gladiator. He saw himself as the last of his kind, holding the heart of his dead mother and screaming at the moon. He cried in silence. Helena was confronted with the daughter she never had, a girl with green eyes and a radiant smile lost in an explosion of light caused by a magical war. Her knees weakened, but she continued, "Kyle!" Kale saw what could have been if he had refused the call of the gods. A simple life with Mara alive, a home, peace, love. He wanted to stay, but he couldn't. The sentinel of three voices on the 777th step, they encountered the sentinel of three. Voices, an entity dressed in robes of black clouds and crowned by fallen stars. She spoke in three tones simultaneously, child, adult, and elder. You seek the cradle of origin, but you do not know what lies there. You do not understand what you will unleash. Helena, exhausted, replied, "We have no choice. The world can no longer bear it. The light is disappearing. The veils are collapsing. If we do not go to the end, all will be lost." The sentinel raised three hands. Then sacrifice. To continue, you must renounce your identity. The sacrifice of memory. The requirement was clear. To climb the last 333 steps, the bearers had to let go of their most fundamental memories. They could no longer remember who they were, where they came from, or why they were there. Helena was the first. She touched the sentinel's palm and her history faded like sand in the wind. Her eyes lost the spark of recognition. She still felt, still fought, but she no longer knew why. Tharion hesitated, but followed. He lost the name of his species. He lost the name of his mother. Kyle looked at the starry sky. He thought of Myra, of Elvar, of Balder, of everything, and then he touched the palm. His past was erased. The cradle of origin, at the end of the stairway, there was a field of sleeping stars. There, amidst eternity, pulsed the cradle of origin, a translucent sphere the size of a human heart, floating above a leafless tree, whose branches were made of memories. Inside the sphere were the last two fragments of the Ljósstyrka, the fragment of infinite consciousness, the fragment of perfect void. Together they formed the beginning and the end of all things, but to touch them, one had to remember who they were. Only with total self-knowledge would it be possible to receive such power. Kell tried, but he no longer remembered his name. Balder returns. Kell! The voice broke the silence like a sword. Balder appeared in a beam of light, dirty, exhausted, wounded, but determined. You are Kell, son of Erin, brother of Myra, bearer of the hope that remains. At the sound of the words, Kell staggered, and then he cried. Memories exploded within him. The pain, the love, the fear, the struggle. Everything returned. He touched the sphere, and the two fragments recognized him. A glow enveloped the universe, and at its center, Kyle stood with the seven fragments pulsing around his body. The complete light, the seven fragments united. Light and darkness ceased to be opposites. They became a cycle. The Ljósstyrka revealed itself not as a weapon, but as a living consciousness, made of the essence of everything that ever was, is, and will be. Kell was no longer just human. He was the voice, the guardian of the fractal light. But with the power came a choice: restore the world as it was, with all its mistakes, limits, and potential, or free it, breaking all the laws of reality, destroying time, space, and the gods, and allowing something new to emerge. The choice was not his alone. He looked at Helena, Tharion, Balder, and Elvar. All waited the unspeakable choice. Kell raised his hand. The light trembled. He spoke, but what he said, no being could understand. There were no words in that language, only intention, and the universe obeyed. Chapter 34. The Dawn of Choice. What Kyle said to the universe will never be known, not because it was a secret, but because his words transcended the concept of language. What was spoken did not fit into the senses, neither in the mind nor in the soul. It was understood only by the very structure of reality, as if the cosmos had heard the most powerful yes or no ever spoken. The result, however, was immediate. The sky, once fragmented, unified into a dome of flaming glass. The laws of gravity began to rewrite themselves. Magic, which had once leaked in disorder, reorganized into dancing patterns similar to constellations. Time stopped, and then began to flow again, from the end to the beginning. The world had been reconfigured, but not destroyed. Kyle had made his choice, not to start over, but to repair, and this decision carried a new price. The new Kale with the 7 fragments unified. Kale was no longer a man. His eyes were constellations. His skin shimmered like frozen sea. His voice made flowers bloom from rock. But above all, his mind touched all minds. He was the sum of all possibilities that had ever existed. But there was a problem. He was not just Kyle. The union with the Ljostyrka had brought echoes of all versions of himself from alternate realities. Entire lives fought within him for meaning. In one reality, Kale had been a villain. In another, a martyr. In a third, an insane god. Now, these versions tried to take control. Eilina noticed first. He is fighting against himself, Balder nodded. And if he loses, everything will be undone. The forge of the self to stabilize his new form, Kale would have to forge a solid identity. It wasn't enough to know who he was. He had to choose himself. It was then that the echoes of the inverse appeared, visions of himself, personified walking around him, the tyrannical Kale, crowned with the blood of the worlds, the savior Kale with hands of light but sad eyes, the indifferent Kale who watched everything end without lifting a finger. Each argued that they were the true one. Kyle, in the center, listened. The judgment of Umbral. Meanwhile, Umbral, the fallen god of the naked truth, awoke from the forced sleep after Morthak's defeat. He was the last danger, not out of desire for destruction, but out of conviction. Every cycle needs an end. Every song needs to silence. Existence is the most enduring mistake of the multiverse. Umbral did not hate. He simply believed that the end was natural, and he came to finalize it. From the core of reality, Umbral ascended like an eclipse of flesh and logic, surrounded by harpies made of forgotten memory. He would not fight with weapons. He would fight with arguments. The cosmic debate, Kyle, still surrounded by the echoes, felt Umbral before him, and the battle began. But not with swords. With ideas, Umbral said, "You mended what needed to crumble. Mistake. Each mend creates a new crack." Kale replied, "And each crack can be filled with love." Umbral retorted, "Love is unstable. It causes war, pain, jealousy. Love destroys more than it rebuilds." Kale smiled, though divided. Love also builds the courage to start over. The universe stopped to listen. Stars that had ceased to shine reignited, as if approving the words, but Umbral did not retreat. He brought forth a memory, the moment when Mara died. He replayed the pain, the mourning, the guilt. You want to fix the world, but you couldn't save one life. Who are you to decide? Kale fell to his knees, but then Eilina approached. She placed her hand on his shoulder. You are not alone, you never were. And around Kale, the bearers of the fractal light began to sing, not a song with notes, but with intentions, the song of free will, the chosen echo. Within Kyle, the versions of himself began to disappear, not by force, but by choice. He looked at each of them and said, I recognize all of you. All of you are part of me, but now I choose to be the Kale who loves, who learns, who fails, who rises. His body shone, the voices ceased, the constellations in his eyes aligned. Kyle was now one. Umbral trembled. For the first time, he doubted. The battle of existence. The doubt weakened Umbral, and Kale used the light not as a weapon, but as a mirror. He showed the fallen god all the moments when the end seemed certain, but was avoided by something small, a gesture, a look, a forgiveness, a hope. Umbraal saw children being born even in the midst of war. He saw lovers reuniting after centuries apart. He saw the sacrifice of Elvar, the tears of Therion, the silence of Eilena. He saw beauty, and he cried. The harpies dissolved into petals. Umbraal's body turned into light. He knelt and said, "If there is a mistake, let it continue," and disappeared. The silence. After the storm, reality calmed. The 7 fragments merged into a new heart of creation, which now pulsed within Chaol himself. But he knew it was not forever. The energy needed to return to the source. The choice has been made, but the cycle will begin again one day, he said, looking at the sky. Eilena asked, "And us?" Chaol replied, "We will be the stories that inspire the next Chaol, the silence." Where eternity is born time began to flow again, not as before, not in a line but in a spiral. Each second was now a seed, each moment a possible universe. The gods had departed, not by death, but by transcendence. They had become part of what they protected. The war that once defined the heavens became merely an echo. The world, or rather, the worlds, were now free to grow without chains, without manipulation, without imposed destiny. Chaol observed from a plane above form. He was no longer a man, nor a god. He was the guardian of origin, the link between what was, what is, and what could be. But even with all the power that pulsed in his essence, he chose to forget. Chose not to reign, not to dominate, not to guide. He chose to be human again. The last journey, Eilena, Therion, and the few survivors of the previous eras founded a new civilization, not in the name of kings or prophets, but in the name of memory. The memory of what was lost and what was conquered. The old cities were transformed into gardens. The weapons melted into bells that rang at dawn. The fragments of the Ljostyrk no longer needed protection. They had dissolved into the air, the soil, the water. The whole world was now light. And Chaol? He appeared sometimes as a nameless wanderer who told stories to children and smiled at the sunset. No one knew who he was, but everyone felt that something sacred walked there. The reunion on a day that seemed like a dream. Chaol reached the top of a hill. There the wind blew like an ancient song, and by his side was Myera, not as a spirit, not as a memory. She was alive, not because she was brought back, but because in this new world pain was redesigned as a bridge. Death was no longer an end, but a passage, and those with true bonds could reunite, even after goodbye. Chaol looked at her. She smiled. Nothing was said, but everything was felt. The last portal in the depths of the sky, a new star appeared. It was the last portal, not a threat, not an escape. It was an invitation for those ready to become the authors of the next universe. Eilena was the first to cross, driven by her eternal search for healing and meaning. Therion followed, with tired eyes, but a soul at peace. Chaol and Mera, hand in hand, walked among the stars, and as they touched the threshold of the portal, a voice, not divine, but deeply human, said, "Now it's up to you." Epilogue. When silence sings, somewhere in some time, a new world was born, made not of chaos or order, but of possibility. There, children played without fear of the future. Dreamers could fly. And the memories of the ancient war were told as campfire tales, not to teach fear, but to celebrate the choice to love, to forgive, to follow. And on the horizon, in a simple house, an old man wrote on a parchment, "We are not made of light or shadow. We are made of choice, and as long as we can choose, we will never be lost." Chapter 35. The Song of Gods and Men in the Beginning. Before time had a name, there was only the void, a silent field where the seeds of creation slept. From the void emerged the first gods, born not of parents, but from the universe's own desire to know itself. They shaped the primordial world, giving rise to the Golden Age, where harmony and balance reigned. But perfection was unsustainable. Over time, conflicts arose among the gods. Some sought to preserve order, others yearned for change. The omens of Ragnarok announced the inevitable fall. A divine war was waged, and the world trembled under the weight of celestial battles. When Ragnarok began, brothers fought against brothers, and the sky fell upon the earth. The battle was devastating, but it also brought rebirth. From the ashes of the old world, a new sprout of hope emerged. The survivors, gods and humans, came together to rebuild what was lost. The world was reborn with new wisdom, now governed not only by gods but also by men, awakened to their role in the universal destiny. Then, the last prophecy was revealed, speaking of a chosen one capable of uniting the fragments of the primordial light, the Ljósstyrka, and deciding the future of all existence. This chosen one was Kale, a young man marked by tragedies, but also by an unshakable force of compassion. With the support of allies like Eilina, priestess of the forgotten songs, and Therion, the warrior of the glass forest, Kale traversed realms, faced horrors, and touched the limits of sanity to gather the 7 fragments of light. Along the way, cities were built, alliances between gods and humans were sealed, and the peoples of the earth celebrated life as never before. But there were also losses. Loves died, innocence fell, and the bearers of truth were silenced. During his journey, Kyle learned the arts of healing, war, leadership, and renunciation. But the greatest lesson would come at the end, the understanding that free will, conscious choice, was more powerful than any divine weapon. At the pinnacle of the saga, when reality was about to fragment under the pressure of the forces of the end, Kyle faced Umbral, the fallen god of the naked truth, who wished to undo existence itself, seeing it as a persistent error. But Kale, instead of destroying him, convinced him. He showed him the value of small things: forgiveness, sacrifice, hope. Kyle did not restart the world. He repaired it. He chose to keep the scars, the mistakes, and the successes. For it is in the cracks that light finds its way with the world. Reborn, the gods departed, not by death, but by choice. They became part of existence itself, dissolving into the winds, rivers, and stars. Humans inherited the future, free from the chains of destiny. Kyle, now endowed with the power of the 7 fragments, refused to reign. He became a wanderer. He visited villages as an old storyteller. By his side one day Maera appeared, the woman he had lost in the first war. In a world where time and death no longer had the same meaning, the two could reunite. Atop a hill, before a sky where the last portal shone, Kale and his companions decided to leave, not in flight, but in celebration. It was time to make room for the next authors of reality. Epilogue. The song continues. In the ages that followed, the story of Kyle and the ancient gods was passed on as a song, a chant of courage, love, and rebirth. It is said that on silent nights, when the wind blows through the ruins of the old cities, it is possible to hear a soft voice saying, "We are not made of light or darkness. We are made of choice. And as long as we can choose, we will never be lost." Chapter 36. The Awakening of the Lost Echoes. The world, now free from the chains of destiny, flourished in colors and sounds never before seen. People, liberated from the old prophecies, began to explore the limits of their own existence, discovering new forms of art, science, and spirituality. However, in the depths of the new universe, something stirred. The lost echoes, fragments of forgotten alternate realities, began to emerge from the shadows. These echoes were not just memories, but living entities, each representing a path not taken, a decision not made. They wandered the world, whispering, hidden truths and challenging the new order. Kale, now a guardian of the light, felt the disturbance in the fabric of reality. He knew these echoes needed to be understood, not destroyed. Kale gathered his companions, Elena and Tharion, and together they set out to find the source of the echoes. Their journey took them through ancient ruins and forgotten forests, where the echoes were strongest. Along the way, they encountered beings who had been touched by the echoes, their minds filled with visions of what could have been. One such being was a young woman named Lyria, who had been haunted by visions of a life she never lived. She spoke of a world where she had been a great leader, but in this reality she was just a simple farmer. The echoes had shown her a path she never took, and it had left her yearning for something she couldn't quite grasp. Kyle listened to her story with empathy. He understood the pain of seeing a life that could have been, the longing for a path not taken. He assured her that her current life was just as valuable, and that the echoes were not meant to torment, but to teach. As they continued their journey, they encountered more people affected by the echoes. Some were filled with regret, others with curiosity. Kale and his companions helped them understand that the echoes were a part of them, a reminder of the choices they had made and the paths they had taken. Finally, they reached the heart of the echoes, a place where the fabric of reality was thin and the echoes were strongest. There they found a being of pure light, a guardian of the echoes. The guardian explained that the echoes were not meant to be feared or destroyed, but to be embraced. They were a part of the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. Kyle and his companions returned to their village, their minds filled with new understanding. They knew that the echoes would continue to emerge, but they were no longer a threat. They were a part of the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. As they walked through the village, they saw people who had been touched by the echoes, their minds filled with new understanding. They saw a world that was no longer bound by destiny, but free to explore the infinite possibilities that existed. And so, the world continued to flourish, the echoes no longer a threat, but a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. Kale and his companions knew that their journey was not over, but they were no longer afraid. They were ready to embrace the echoes, to understand them, and to help others do the same. Chapter 37. The Whispering Shadows. As the echoes continued to emerge, they brought with them whispers of the past, shadows of forgotten realities that lingered in the corners of the world. These shadows were not just remnants of what could have been, but entities that sought to pull the world back into the chaos of the old prophecies. Kale and his companions, now joined by Lyria, set out to confront these shadows. Their journey took them through dark forests and desolate plains where the shadows were strongest. Along the way, they encountered beings who had been touched by the shadows, their minds filled with fear and doubt. One such being was a man named Aemon, who had been haunted by visions of a world where he had been a great warrior. In this reality, he was just a simple blacksmith, but the shadows had shown him a path of glory and power. He was filled with regret and longing, his mind torn between the life he had and the life he could have had. Kyle listened to his story with empathy. He understood the pain of seeing a life that could have been, the longing for a path not taken. He assured him that his current life was just as valuable, and that the shadows were not meant to torment, but to teach. As they continued their journey, they encountered more people affected by the shadows. Some were filled with fear, others with doubt. Kyle and his companions helped them understand that the shadows were a part of them, a reminder of the choices they had made and the paths they had taken. Finally, they reached the heart of the shadows, a place where the fabric of reality was thin and the shadows were strongest. There they found a being of pure darkness, a guardian of the shadows. The guardian explained that the shadows were not meant to be feared or destroyed, but to be embraced. They were a part of the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. Kyle and his companions returned to their village, their minds filled with new understanding. They knew that the shadows would continue to emerge, but they were no longer a threat. They were a part of the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. As they walked through the village, they saw people who had been touched by the shadows, their minds filled with new understanding. They saw a world that was no longer bound by destiny, but free to explore the infinite possibilities that existed, and so the world continued to flourish, the shadows no longer a threat, but a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. Kale and his companions knew that their journey was not over, but they were no longer afraid. They were ready to embrace the shadows, to understand them, and to help others do the same. Chapter 38. The Dance of the Forgotten. As the echoes and shadows continued to emerge, they brought with them a dance of the forgotten, a rhythm that pulsed through the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. This dance was not just a celebration of what could have been, but a call to embrace the present, to live in the moment, and to find joy in the journey. Kyle and his companions, now joined by Lyria and Aemon, set out to join this dance. Their journey took them through vibrant cities and lush forests, where the dance was strongest. Along the way, they encountered beings who had been touched by the dance, their minds filled with joy and wonder. One such being was a woman named Sariel, who had been haunted by visions of a world where she had been a great dancer. In this reality, she was just a simple weaver, but the dance had shown her a path of grace and beauty. She was filled with joy and wonder, her mind filled with the rhythm of the dance. Kyle listened to her story with empathy. He understood the joy of seeing a life that could have been, the wonder of a path not taken. He assured her that her current life was just as valuable, and that the dance was not meant to torment, but to teach. As they continued their journey, they encountered more people affected by the dance. Some were filled with joy, others with wonder. Kyle and his companions helped them understand that the dance was a part of them, a reminder of the choices they had made and the paths they had taken. Finally, they reached the heart of the dance, a place where the fabric of reality was thin and the dance was strongest. There, they found a being of pure light and darkness, a guardian of the dance. The guardian explained that the dance was not meant to be feared or destroyed, but to be embraced. It was a part of the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. Kyle and his companions returned to their village, their minds filled with new understanding. They knew that the dance would continue to emerge, but it was no longer a threat. It was a part of the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. As they walked through the village, they saw people who had been touched by the worries dance, their minds filled with new understanding. They saw a world that was no longer bound by destiny, but free to explore the infinite possibilities that existed. And so, the world continued to flourish. The dance no longer a threat, but a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. Kale and his companions knew that their journey was not over, but they were no longer afraid. They were ready to embrace the dance, to understand it, and to help others do the same. Chapter 40. The Song of the New Dawn. As the echoes, shadows, and dance continued to emerge, they brought with them a song of the new dawn, a melody that echoed through the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. This song was not just a celebration of what could have been, but a call to embrace the present, to live in the moment, and to find joy in the journey. Kyle and his companions, now joined by Lyria, Aemon, and Sariel, set out to join this song. Their journey took them through vibrant cities and lush forests, where the song was strongest. Along the way, they encountered beings who had been touched by the song, their minds filled with joy and wonder. One such being was a man named Calum, who had been haunted by visions of a world where he had been a great musician. In this reality, he was just a simple farmer, but the song had shown him a path of harmony and beauty. He was filled with joy and wonder, his mind filled with the melody of the song. Cale listened to his story with empathy. He understood the joy of seeing a life that could have been, the wonder of a path not taken. He assured him that his current life was just as valuable, and that the song was not meant to torment, but to teach. As they continued their journey, they encountered more people affected by the song. Some were filled with joy, others with wonder. Cale and his companions helped them understand that the song was a part of them, a reminder of the choices they had made and the paths they had taken. Finally, they reached the heart of the song, a place where the fabric of reality was thin and the song was strongest. There they found a being of pure light and darkness, a guardian of the song. The guardian explained that the song was not meant to be feared or destroyed, but to be embraced. It was a part of the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. Kyle and his companions returned to their village, their minds filled with new understanding. They knew that the song would continue to emerge, but it was no longer a threat. It was a part of the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. As they walked through the village, they saw people who had been touched by the song, their minds filled with new understanding. They saw a world that was no longer bound by destiny, but free to explore the infinite possibilities that existed. And so, the world continued to flourish. The song no longer a threat, but a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. Kyle and his companions knew that their journey was not over, but they were no longer afraid. They were ready to embrace the song, to understand it, and to help others do the same. Chapter 40, The Light of the Infinite. As the echoes, shadows, dance, and song continued to emerge, they brought with them a light of the infinite, a glow that illuminated the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. This light was not just a celebration of what could have been, but a call to embrace the present, to live in the moment, and to find joy in the journey. Kyle and his companions, now joined by Lyria, Aemon, Sariel, and Calem, set out to join this light. Their journey took them through vibrant cities and lush forests where the light was strongest. Along the way, they encountered beings who had been touched by the light, their minds filled with joy and wonder. One such being was a woman named Leora, who had been haunted by visions of a world where she had been a great leader. In this reality, she was just a simple weaver, but the light had shown her a path of wisdom and beauty. She was filled with joy and wonder, her mind filled with the glow of the light. Cale listened to her story with empathy. He understood the joy of seeing a life that could have been, the wonder of a path not taken. He assured her that her current life was just as valuable, and that the light was not meant to torment, but to teach. As they continued their journey, they encountered more people affected by the light. Some were filled with joy, others with wonder. Cale and his companions helped them understand that the light was a part of them, a reminder of the choices they had made and the paths they had taken. Finally, they reached the heart of the light, a place where the fabric of reality was thin and the light was strongest. There they found a being of pure light and darkness, a guardian of the light. The guardian explained that the light was not meant to be feared or destroyed, but to be embraced. It was a part of the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. Cale and his companions returned to their village, their minds filled with new understanding. They knew that the light would continue to emerge, but it was no longer a threat. It was a part of the world, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. As they walked through the village, they saw people who had been touched by the light, their minds filled with new understanding. They saw a world that was no longer bound by destiny, but free to explore the infinite possibilities that existed. And so, the world continued to flourish. The light no longer a threat, but a reminder of the infinite possibilities that existed. Kale and his companions knew that their journey was not over, but they were no longer afraid. They were ready to embrace the light, to understand it, and to help others do the same. Final chapter. The silence, where eternity is born time, began to flow again, not as before, not in a straight line, but in a spiral. Each second was now a seed, each moment a possible universe. The gods had departed, not through death, but through transcendence. They had become part of what they once protected. The war that once defined the heavens had become only an echo. The world, or rather the worlds, were now free to grow without chains, without manipulation, without an imposed destiny. Kyle watched from a plane beyond form. He was no longer a man, nor a god. He was the guardian of the origin, the link between what was, what is, and what could be. But even with all the power pulsing in his essence, he chose to forget, chose not to rule, not to dominate, not to guide. He chose to become human again. The final journey, Aelena, Therion, and the few survivors of earlier ages founded a new civilization, not in the name of kings or prophets, but in the name of memory, the memory of what was lost and of what was gained. The ancient cities were turned into gardens. The weapons melted into bells that rang at dawn. The fragments of Leostyrka no longer needed to be protected. They had dissolved into the air, the soil, the water. The entire world was now light. And Kyle? He appeared sometimes as a nameless wanderer who told stories to children and smiled at the sunset. No one knew who he was, but everyone felt that something sacred walked there. The reunion, on a day that felt like a dream. Kale reached the top of a hill. There the wind blew like an ancient song, and beside him stood Mara. Not as a spirit, not as a memory. She was alive, not because she had been brought back, but because in that new world pain had been redrawn as a bridge. Death was no longer an end, but a passage. And those bound by true ties could meet again, even after goodbye. Kylie looked at her, she smiled. Nothing was said, but everything was felt. The final portal, in the depths of the sky. A new star appeared. It was the final portal, not a threat, not an escape. It was an invitation for those ready to become the authors of the next universe Aelena was the first to cross. Drawn by her eternal search for healing and meaning, Therion followed after, with tired eyes but a soul at peace. Kyle and Myra, hand in hand, walked among the stars. And as they touched the threshold of the portal, a voice, not divine, but deeply human, said, "Now it's up to you." Epilogue. When silence sings somewhere, in some time, a new world was born, not made of chaos or order, but of possibility. There, children played without fear of the future. Dreamers could fly. And the memories of the ancient war were told as campfire tales, not to teach fear, but to celebrate a choice, the choice to love, to forgive, to move forward. And on the horizon, in a simple house, an old man wrote on a scroll, "We are not made of light or shadow. We are made of choice. And as long as we can choose, we will never be lost." Final summary, the Song of Gods and Men. The beginning, before time had a name, there was only the void, a silent field where the seeds of creation slept. From the void emerged the first gods, born not of parents, but from the universe's own desire to know itself. It was they who shaped the primordial world, ushering in the golden age, where harmony and balance reigned. But perfection was unsustainable. In time, conflicts arose among the gods. Some sought to preserve order, others longed for change. The omens of Ragnarok foretold the inevitable fall. A divine war erupted, and the world trembled under the weight of celestial battles. When Ragnarok began, brothers fought against brothers, and the sky fell upon the earth. The battle was devastating. But it also birthed renewal. From the ashes of the old world, a new sprout of hope emerged. The survivors, both gods and humans, came together to rebuild what had been lost. The world was reborn with newfound wisdom, no longer ruled solely by gods, but also by men, awakened to their role in the fate of the universe. Then came the last prophecy, which spoke of a chosen one capable of uniting the fragments of the primordial light, the Ljósstyrka, and deciding the future of all existence. That chosen one was Kyle, a young man marked by tragedy, yet driven by an unshakable force of compassion. With the help of allies such as Ylena, priestess of forgotten songs, and Therion, warrior of the glass forest, Kale crossed realms, faced horrors, and touched the edge of madness to gather the 7 fragments of light. Along the way, cities were raised, alliances between gods and humans were forged, and the peoples of the earth celebrated life as never before. But there were losses too. Loves were lost, innocence fell, and bearers of truth were silenced. Throughout his journey, Kale learned the arts of healing, war, leadership, and sacrifice. But his greatest lesson came at the end, the realization that free will, conscious choice, was more powerful than any divine weapon. At the height of the saga, when reality was on the verge of shattering under the pressure of the end times, Kyle faced Umbraal, the fallen god of naked truth, who sought to unmake existence itself, seeing it as a persistent error. But Kale, instead of destroying him, persuaded him. He revealed the value of small things, of forgiveness, of sacrifice, of hope. Kale did not restart the world. He repaired it. He chose to keep the scars, the errors, and the triumphs. For it is through the cracks that the light finds its way. With the world reborn, the gods departed, not through death, but by choice. They became part of existence itself, dissolving into the winds, the rivers, the stars. Humanity inherited the future, free from the chains of destiny. Kyle, now wielding the power of the 7 fragments, refused to reign. He became a wanderer. He visited villages as an old storyteller, and one day beside him appeared Maera, the woman he had lost in the first war. In a world where time and death no longer held the same meaning, the two were able to meet again. The top of a hill beneath a sky where the last portal shone, Kyle and his companions chose to depart, not in escape, but in celebration. It was time to make room for the next authors of reality. Epilogue. The song continues. In the ages that followed, the story of Kale and the ancient gods was passed down as a song, a hymn of courage, love, and rebirth. They say that on silent nights, when the wind whispers through the ruins of the old cities, you can hear a soft voice saying, "We are not made of light or shadow. We are made of choice. And as long as we can choose, we will never be lost." Are you ready to embark on a journey unlike any other, one that soothes your soul while awakening your imagination? Press play and allow the ancient tale of Ragnarok to carry you through realms of gods, warriors, and forgotten songs, all gently guiding you toward a night of deep, restful sleep. This isn't just a story, it's a lullaby woven with stardust and myth, crafted to calm your thoughts and cradle your dreams. If this journey brings peace to your night and wonder to your heart, don't forget to show your support. Tap the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell icon so you never miss a new chapter, each one designed to quiet your mind and awaken your spirit. Now, take a deep breath. Let the weight of the day melt away. The stars are waiting. The story begins. Good night, and may your dreams be as vast as the cosmos.